Ever wonder what is actually going on in your brain when you make a really big decision? I mean, we're not just talking about what to have for lunch. We're talking about the hidden architecture behind every major choice, whether it's a personal dilemma or a huge national policy. Today, we're going to break down the anatomy of a value judgment.
So, let's start with a classic. An autonomous car is about to crash. Does it save the person inside or a pedestrian on the street? Here's the thing. This isn't just a thought experiment for a philosophy class anymore. This is a literal engineering problem that has to be solved with code. And right at the heart of it is a value judgment, a choice between two totally valid but competing principles. How we even start to tackle this question reveals this amazing process that happens inside all of our heads.
You know, the first step in any decision, it isn't thinking, it's feeling. Before your conscious mind even has a chance to catch up and process what's happening, some deep subconscious part of your brain has already cooked up an initial reaction. This is that gut feeling, and it happens, well, pretty much instantly.
So what is this lightning-fast reaction? It's called appraisal. You can think of it like your brain's built-in immediate threat detector. Let's take national security, for example. Intelligence picks up a massive troop movement. Now, is it a totally harmless drill, or is it a seriously threatening mobilization? That first instantaneous appraisal changes everything. It sets the stage for a completely different chain of events.
What's really interesting, though, is that this gut reaction has a couple of distinct flavors. You've got good versus bad, which is kind of like a simple moral binary. Your brain is trying to put it in a category. But then there's something even more fundamental, like versus dislike. This is a raw, almost animal response, that basic instinct to either approach something or run away from it. And it happens milliseconds before any conscious thought kicks in.
So when we talk about a feeling-based assessment, we are not talking about some vague, mystical hunch. It's actually a highly tuned form of subconscious pattern recognition. Think about a crisis leader or a high-frequency trader. These people have to make huge decisions in seconds. There's no time for a spreadsheet. They rely on what are called somatic markers, actual physical sensations, those literal gut feelings that are the result of their brain processing thousands of variables way below the level of awareness.
Okay, but that gut feeling, it's just the beginning. After that initial raw reaction, our conscious mind finally logs on. And this is where we take that feeling and we filter it through our established frameworks. You know, our own personal operating system for how the world works and how we think we should act in it. And this mental operating system is built from a few key parts. We've got our ethical frameworks, which tell us what we think is right and wrong. We've got our moral codes that guide our behavior, our core beliefs, which shape our entire worldview, and maybe most important of all, our personal hierarchy of values. All of these together, they guide our deliberation and help us turn a raw impulse into a thought-out choice.
Now, one of the most powerful and, let's be honest, dangerous filters we have is belief-based assessment. We all do this. We tend to accept data that lines up with what we already believe, and we find ways to reject data that doesn't. That's confirmation bias in action. And this presents a massive challenge for something like AI alignment, because if an AI learns from our data, it can actually inherit our biases and start treating them like objective truths. And that creates a system that is just as flawed as we are.
This is the big one. We all have a hierarchy of values. When two of our principles clash, which one wins? I mean, do you value security more than privacy? Maybe honesty more than loyalty? This internal ranking, it pretty much defines who we are, and it predicts what we'll do. You can see this play out on a huge scale in national budgets. The amount of money a country puts into defense versus education, that's probably the clearest possible statement of that nation's collective value hierarchy.
And all this talk of values leads perfectly to something called a normative statement. It's a judgment about how things should be, not just how they are. Take the debate over the minimum wage. It's not just about the economic data. It's really driven by a normative statement, the idea that people ought to earn a living wage. That's a value judgment, and just recognizing it as one helps us separate the hard data from the values debate so we can have a more productive conversation.
Okay, so we've had the gut reaction, we've run it through our internal rulebook. Now what? Well, now we've reached the climax of the whole decision-making process. This is the moment of commitment. It's where all the possibilities, all the analysis, all the maybes, they all collapse into a single, irreversible action.
This, right here, is the core of judgment. It's the act of taking a whole universe of possibilities and turning it into one single, concrete this. It definitely requires executive function, that part of your brain that handles planning, but it also needs something more. It needs the courage to make a call and to accept the consequences if you're wrong. This is the essential, completely unautomatable job of any true leader.
This quote just nails it.
It perfectly captures the difference between AI and us. An AI can crunch the numbers and tell you what's likely to happen. It gives you a probability. But it can't tell you whether that outcome is right or good or acceptable. That requires judgment. That requires values. That requires a human.
A lot of the time, this big abstract judgment has to be translated into a hard number. A price. That's what we call a worth assessment. Think about when one company buys another. The price they pay is almost always way, way more than what the company's assets are actually worth on paper. That difference has a name: goodwill. And goodwill is basically just a financial term for a massive value judgment about that company's future, its brand, its talent, all the stuff that doesn't show up on a balance sheet.
So, how does this all come together in the real world? In a world that's getting more and more driven by data and algorithms, it's easy to think that human decision-making is on its way out. But the truth is, our most important work happens in the very places where the data runs out. Let's call this the zone. It's that gray area of ambiguity where the spreadsheet just has no more answers for you. This is the world of CEOs, of strategists, of anyone who has to make a tough call with incomplete information. It's where intuition, experience, ethics, and wisdom are the only tools you've got to find the path forward.
So as AI and automation get better and better at prediction, our role as humans isn't going away, it's just shifting. Our greatest value isn't going to be in processing information anymore, but in exercising judgment. It's navigating that complex, ambiguous, and ethically charged territory of the zone. And that leaves us with a huge question for the future. If AI is going to handle the what is, and our job becomes handling the what ought to be, what does that mean? What does it mean for our schools, for how we train leaders, for how we even think about our own intelligence? How do we practice and cultivate this uniquely human skill of value judgment to get better at making the calls that truly, truly matter?